First up on the show, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed in Moscow for the 22nd India-Russia summit. Prime Minister Modi, who is on a two-day visit to Russia, has been received with a huge red carpet welcome at the international airport in Moscow, and Prime Minister received a guard of honor at the airport. The visit marks the first visit to Russia since the beginning of the Ukraine war in 2022. The Indian Prime Minister was received by the Russia's first Deputy Prime Minister. The Russian artists are performing a garba to welcome Prime Minister Modi at his hotel. And later in the evening, the Russian President Vladimir Putin will also be hosting a private dinner for Prime Minister Modi at his residence on the outskirts of Moscow. And these are some of those visuals there coming in from outside the hotel where Prime Minister Modi is going to be staying. That garba performance by the Russian team there outside for the visiting Prime Minister. Now, the two leaders are expected to discuss regional and global developments of mutual interest. Defence investment, energy cooperation, education and culture will be top of the agenda of the bilateral talks. Prime Minister Modi will also talk about the Indians who were quote-unquote misled into joining the Russian army in its war against Ukraine. He is expected to demand the earliest discharge of these Indians from the Russian military. Till now, at least 4 Indians have been killed amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Remember, Moscow remains a key supplier of cut-price oil and weapons to India. But Kremlin's isolation from the West and blooming friendship with Beijing have impacted its partnership with New Delhi. In recent years, Western powers have also cultivated ties with India while pressuring it to distance it from Russia. And for the very latest on this, we're now being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibbal, live from Moscow. And Siddhant, so this is, of course, a crucial visit by the Prime Minister to Moscow. This is the first of this kind of meeting between the two leaders since the war in Ukraine began. A lot of things on the agenda, including a private dinner and, of course, a diaspora event.
It's a packed agenda for the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi here in Moscow. Now, he just reached here, and behind me is his hotel where his convoy has just arrived. There's little commotion as always, but of course, enthusiastic crowd, diaspora members welcoming the Indian Prime Minister. Now, talking about the substantive portion of the conversation that will happen tomorrow at the India-Russia summit. There will be issues of convergences, whether it's energy, whether it's connectivity, whether it's defense, security, space, but also issues that worries New Delhi. That includes increasing trade deficit. Yes, India has increased its import of Russian crude oil, but that has led to increased trade deficit because what India wants is that the Russians should buy more and more goods from India. The second, of course, is the Indians in the Russian army. India, of course, wants an early release of them. This was an issue that was raised during the last week's meeting between External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and his Russian counterpart, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. But all in all, it's a visit that is coming at a time the NATO summit happens in Washington, and the leader of the world's largest democracy here in Moscow. That is a message in itself. We know that the West is trying to isolate Russia, and at a time of this, Moscow sees New Delhi as a key partner and an ally.
Right, Siddhant, and as we speak, live visuals are coming in of Prime Minister Modi, who's arrived at the hotel, to those celebrations and garba performances that are taking place for the Prime Minister here. And of course, there's a lot of anticipation with the Indian diaspora as well. But most importantly, on the substantive issue, Siddhant, it's important that the Prime Minister has made an exception, and he's visiting Moscow as his first foreign visit. In his last 2 terms, he had visited the neighborhood as part of India's neighborhood first policy. So that in itself is an exception.
Well, yes, there are many firsts to this visit of the Indian Prime Minister. This is his first bilateral visit in his third term. This is his first visit since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This is his first visit to Russia after a gap of 5 years. He last traveled to Russia way back in 2019. But many firsts, but the focus will be on reaffirming the strong partnership between India and Russia. Of course, when it comes to the Russian support to India, it is just not new. It is 70 years old. The Soviets helped India during the Bangladesh Liberation War, and past 2 decades have seen annual summit mechanism. India, of course, buying S-400 from the Russians, despite the CATSA provision of the Americans. India continuing to buy cheap Russian energy since the outbreak of the conflict, despite Western pressure, shows that the level of confidence India enjoys here in Moscow. And of course, Moscow continuing to support India, whether it is bilaterally or internationally as well. Remember, Russia has been supporting India at the United Nations Security Council. Its veto has supported India many times whenever there have been attempts to rake Kashmir at the UNSC. So this is a partnership that's not new. This is a partnership which is old, 70 years old, and this visit only reaffirms the long-standing partnership.
Right, Saddam. Thanks very much indeed for joining us with the very latest there. We will keep coming back to you for more on this top story. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.